Hi guys, welcome back to the Gesture Project. I just want to start by saying a huge thank you to everyone. So last week I released this impromptu audio to accompany my article. I was answering a question that somebody had asked me, and it felt it just felt appropriate to answer it in a voice memo. And then I was like, well, hey, this is kind of cool. Why don't I share this with the article? And the response that I got was so huge, and the reactions were amazing. And so thank you so much to everyone for taking the time to listen and read last week, and also for sending me your questions. I've been flooded with amazing questions about Judaism and life and spirituality and my personal practices. So thank you. I really appreciate all of you so much. So today I want to touch upon one question that kind of kept coming back over and over the course of this week. A few people asked me about motivation and motivation's relationship to inspiration and how they work off each other. So here's the one question that I got that really struck me. So it starts like this. Last week you said that your remedy for inspiration is motivation, but we all know that you have to be inspired to be motivated and vice versa. Where is that motivation supposed to come from? So I love this question. I think it's amazing. It touches on so many points. And thank you so much to the person who submitted that question. She asked to remain anonymous, but I particularly want to emphasize what she said about having to be motivated to let things inspire you. So I think there's this kind of, we think that inspiration and motivation have to have a relationship with each other, and I have to be inspired in order to be motivated, and I have to have this spark in order to push me to get out of bed at 6 a.m., right, to go running. I think the kind of movement, the real focused forward movement that I referred to last week is not rooted in inspiration, right? Because inspiration is super flaky and it's hot and passionate and fiery and exciting, but then it's gone. And motivation at this, in the same respect, can also be flaky. And I think part of the issue is that we also use these words interchangeably, which is something that I'm going to address in my full-length article, but it's just so fascinating to me. If you think about the way that we learn the meanings of words, we learn the textbook definition of how society sees the word, and we either choose to stick with it or we try to find our own definition. But usually, and at least this is how I used to live my life, is that somebody would tell me what something meant, and I would question it and kind of probe, but then I would just accept it. And that's kind of where the Gesher Project came from, is myself and other people in my life were struggling with the definitions to words and phrases and traditions that, the original definitions that had been used by society were great, but didn't work for me or for the people in my life. And so that's how this came to be. And it's so interesting that specifically in the last week, the two things that came up were inspiration and motivation, which are two very difficult things for people to understand. And what's so interesting is, so I actually went and looked up the textbook definition of motivation for this article today. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I like to begin my articles by using the typical definition that everybody uses and then showing my own way through Torah learning and through Hasidus. So the Psychology Today definition of motivation is the desire to do things. And I have to flat out disagree with that definition. Yes, motivation comes from a desire to do things. But then what happens when that desire isn't so exciting anymore? I don't know about you guys, but where is the desire to get up at 6 a.m. to go for a run when it's raining and dark outside? If inspiration is passionate and fiery and hot, then motivation can kind of lead us astray in the same way. I think motivation offers this false promise. If I feel inspired, then I'll have the energy to be motivated. And if I feel the energy to be motivated, then I'll do whatever it is that I want to do. But that's because my life feels so enlightening and it fills me with purpose and I'm motivated to do the things that make me feel good. Okay, but what happens when it doesn't feel good anymore? Or your desire changes? My desire is to finish writing my second novel. Do you know how many times in the last 3 years that desire has changed? Or the reasons behind that desire has changed? The desire is still there, but the reasons are different. So what? As soon as the reasons change, I no longer feel motivated and then I put it on the shelf and call it a day? Like, if that's how motivation works, then we're in a lot of trouble. I think we have assigned false hope and false expectation and a sense of kind of flimsy meaning to what a motivation is supposed to do for us and like what it's supposed to help us create. And I don't think it's fair to you or to the areas of your life that you want to change. We have this idea that the things that you do, the things that motivate you have to move you and change you and make you feel like your heart's on fire and you're so passionate and excited about it. And if those are not the feelings that you're experiencing, then it's obviously not worth it. But, if you think about it, it's the most mundane, everyday tasks of life. Those are the ones that are the most worth it. And let's be honest here, there's a very little glamour in the long-term work of the things we want to accomplish. Taking the example of writing, there's not a lot of glamour of sitting, and sitting down in front of my computer and trying to write out a chapter again and again and again and again and sitting down and the words are not coming out. There's no glamour in that. It's very frustrating. And sometimes there's crying involved. That's not glamorous. It's kind of it's just frustrating. But we're so convinced that life has to be so filled with these lightning strikes of amazing feelings and this constant burning desire to do things. And so then we don't really cultivate this sense of purpose in what motivation is. And that's tricky. That's a trap. The other day I was discussing this idea about motivation with one of my friends, and she told me something that was so interesting to me. She said that she broke up with motivation. And so I asked her to elaborate on that because that was just so interesting. So this is word for word what she told me. Okay, she said, "I think the first step to breaking up with motivation is realizing that your life is something worth showing up for. Your regular, mundane, everyday life is not something you should need or want to be convinced to participate in. That's actually a little pathetic." So here's my take on this. Over time, we've become convinced that this is how life works. You have to be inspired and enlightened, and there has to be a line of candies, on the floor when you get up in the morning. There's a chocolate, and then there's a candy bar, and then there's this thing. That's what's motivating you to move down the steps to get your day started. So we have this idea that you have to have something worth showing up for, that it has to be this big grand thing, and I feel like we're trapping ourselves, and we've convinced ourselves of something that doesn't really exist. So what is real motivation? That's the question. You can head over to the blog. See, I got you. My answer to what motivation really is in the full-length article. So thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen. And again, thank you so much to everybody who submitted questions and ideas and debate topics. You guys are awesome, and you guys inspire me in the real sense of the word, the real, true, deep inspiration, not the kind that's flimsy and disappears after 30 seconds. And if any of you have questions or ideas that you'd like to discuss, either in the form of Geshe or with me privately, please feel free to reach out. Let's start a conversation. I feel like nobody really ever talks to each other anymore. So let's just start a global conversation and make real meaningful movement and change in our lives.